everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline from KnittingHouseSquare, and today I'm going to be taking you through some tips I wish I knew at the beginning of making my first jelly roll rug. So a jelly roll rug is something I've always wanted to make and I've always had my eye on. And finally, a little while back, I decided to finally try and make one. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you my process of making this exact jelly roll rug. And I'll also be giving you my 5 tips along the way of what I wish I knew before I started. So this won't be a full tutorial. If you're interested in seeing a full tutorial, I'll link to some really good ones down below of how to make a jelly roll rug. This one's more just my experience as I was making it and some tips I wish I knew. So I'm going to start off just showing you the supplies I have, and then as I go through the process of making this, I'm going to break down my top 5 tips as we go through the video. Let's get started. So all of these are materials I've seen other people use online. So this will be kind of my starting point here. This is my first ever jelly roll rug. And what I have is first, I have one of the rolls of batting. So it's the 2.5 inch thickness. And I just got this at my local quilting store. Then I also bought a jelly roll at my local quilting store again. And I just really liked the purples and the blues. I'll probably use the yellows last. If I don't need to use those, I probably won't use the yellows, sticking in the other color ranges for me. I was trying to think of something that I could roll up my finished fabric onto that's kind of sturdy. So I have a toilet paper roll, and this brand tends to have like really thick toilet paper rolls, so it'll be nice and sturdy. And then I have, just to give it a try, one of the Clover fabric tube makers, and they even show the little jelly roll rug on there. So this I got off Amazon, and I'll be sure to link to all of these down below if I can find them available online. So first up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my jelly roll, and I'm going to start sewing these strips together. There were a total of 40 strips in this jelly roll bundle. So now I'm going to separate each one of these. Trim the excess. And then I'm also going to take these down to my ironing machine. my iron and iron board are in the basement, which is not very scenic. So I will skip that step, but I'm just going to iron each one of these seams flat and open. Now I have my huge roll here all ironed out nicely. And next up, I'm going to read the instructions with this little fabric tube maker. So I've now managed to get my setup here, and it seems like it's pulling through pretty nicely. And then I just wanted to show you how my 2 are spinning over here. So this is actually my mannequin, the bottom part of it where the mannequin usually pops on top of. So I have both of these on here so that I can spin them on this little pole. Okay, so my first tip is when you're making your strips and you're putting the batting into the strips and sewing up the final things, don't sew all the way until the end on both of the ends. So you actually don't want to do it on either one of the ends. The reason being is that when you finish your jelly roll rug, you want to be able to fold your fabric inwards without the batting there. That way you can create a nice little seamless finishing point. Same thing when you start your jelly roll rug, you want to be able to fold your fabric over without having the batting in the way. So if you do accidentally sew all the way to the end of your strips at the top and the bottom, what you're gonna end up doing is what exactly I ended up doing here. You're gonna have to do a little bit of seam ripping. So don't sew all the way until the end is tip number 1. So just to try and show you real quick where exactly I'm sewing this, I have my sewing needle over here in the left position, and then I'm trying to keep this lined up with the left-hand side of my presser foot as I keep going. That way my seam stays close over here on the side to where the 2 pieces of fabric are laying on top of each other. So looking at how much I have left, very little bit amount of the batting. And then here is what I've created. Ignore this one. This pattern will be out in the fall. But here are all of my sewn pieces that I now have. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna iron them again, and then I'm gonna roll them up. That way tomorrow when I come back, I can start forming them into the actual rug shape. So I'm gonna iron them just to hopefully get a little bit of that poof out, make them nice and smooth, and roll them up again on either the toilet paper roll, because that ended up working out really well, or maybe even 2 toilet paper rolls. So I'll catch back up with you tomorrow when I'm ready to start sewing these together. So now next to my sewing machine, I have all of it all ironed and wound up. And now what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna deal with the end I'm gonna start with. So I'm gonna take my batting and I'm gonna cut that out. So this is what I was talking about with that tip number 1. You wanna make sure you don't sew all the way until the end. That way you don't have to do a little seam ripping here so you can fold over the fabric. So now I can fold this fabric inwards. And re-sew that up so that it's a nice, clean little finished piece that I can start off with. Perfect. Next up, I have to decide how big I want it to start off with. After looking at a couple options, I think I'm gonna go with 20 inches. And the way I have it currently laid out is I have the 2 fabric folds facing towards myself. And now I'm gonna loop it. And everyone says this is really kind of hard to do here, for the first one at least. Gonna loop it so then the fabric fold also ends up facing itself. So the 2 sides where the fabric is touching are going in towards each other. And now for my first one, I have to zigzag all the way down this inner seam. So I'm now to the end of that first bit. Here are my zigzag stitches. And I might actually widen mine out just a smidge. You can see my machine kind of skipped every once in a while. So I might widen mine out just a smidge. And I also started down a little bit just because I knew my sewing machine would have trouble starting all the way up here with all that thick fabric. So I will come back to that at the end. I'm gonna widen these a little bit and try that for the next one. The next tip is to switch out your sewing machine needles. This didn't even occur to me until I started knitting this jelly roll rug. I honestly can't remember the last time I switched out my sewing machine needle, but what was happening to me a lot is that my sewing machine, when I was trying to do the zigzag stitch, kept on skipping stitches and it wasn't catching the thread. So I did a bunch of research online, and what I found is that that is likely due to having a dull sewing machine needle. So I switched it out, and I ended up just using 9014 sewing machine needles throughout this project. And I actually switched it out a few times throughout, just because I didn't want to use a dull needle where it would end up skipping those zigzag stitches. It was either skipping them or my thread was breaking were the two issues I was having, but I didn't have those issues as long as I had a fresh sewing machine needle in my machine. I also wanted to mention that I'll put in a little clip here of what my sewing machine settings were set at as I was doing that zigzag stitch, in case you're curious. Okay, so this is where I am currently. The one side, and this wasn't the side I started on, I think this one looks really good. It's nice and flat. The one that I did start on with that really sharp U-turn, this one's not that flat. So before I start sewing around this curve, I'm actually gonna take this down and iron this strip that I have going so far, just so I can get it as flat as possible before I start doing the curve after curve. So my third tip, and something I am most proud of with this project, is how flat it ended up. A common issue people have sewing jelly roll rugs is that the rug will start curving. And the way I prevented this is I just kept on ironing. So tip number 3 is just keep on ironing over and over and over again. Even if you think you've ironed enough, iron it one more time. This was quite the workout for me because, as I mentioned in the video, my sewing machine is on the second floor of my house. My ironing board is in the basement, so it was a workout, but I am glad I did because my jelly roll rug ended up perfectly flat. I'm also going to flip it over. That way I am looping, so I swing it this way and I have a lot more room on my table. Now that I've done another 2 edges, I'm going to iron again. And I think I'm just going to keep on doing that to keep this as flat as I possibly can, because I don't want it to start like turning into a basket. So I'm going to keep on ironing it. Hopefully that helps prevent it from curling. Tip number 4, as you're doing these zigzag stitches, what you're going to notice is that you are going through a lot of sewing machine thread. So what I would actually recommend you do in advance, and this is something I didn't do, and it really broke up the flow in my sewing, is wind up tons of bobbins in advance. So I think in total I ended up using 7 bobbins of thread. So if you can wind those up in advance, it can really keep your flow going as you keep on sewing, rather than having to stop all the time and make new bobbins along the way. So I wish I had done that at the start. Just make more bobbins than you ever think you'll need. Tip number 5 here is more of a technique. So what I found was actually best is if I held the strip that I was currently trying to add onto the rug straight, and then I turned the rug into that strip as I was sewing around. That I think helped a lot along with the ironing to keep my project really flat. So the technique I would use again, it's hold the strip and then turn the rug into the strip as you're sewing along. Don't try and turn the strip because then it kind of gets all out of whack and all out of balance. So now I've reached my very end here, and I'm going to do my best to kind of taper this in at an angle. So first I'm going to take out the seam here at the very end. Again, tip number 1 coming back in handy. Make sure you don't sew all the way until the end of your jelly roll strips, or else you're going to have to seam rip just like I did here. Now that I've tapered in a bit, I'm going to go back and I'm going to iron this whole thing again. Now here is my finished jelly roll rug. And just to recap those 5 tips along the way that I would recommend. First up, when you're sewing your initial strips with the batting in them, don't sew all the way to the end. That way you can easily start and finish your project. Tip number 2 is make sure you're switching out your sewing machine needles. That way you don't have problems with your zigzag skipping or your thread breaking. Tip number 3, keep on ironing. Even if you think it's too much, just iron it one more time. Tip number 4, make sure you wind up lots of bobbins in advance. That way you don't have to break up the flow of your project. And lastly, tip number 5 is I would hold the strip that you're adding on flat or straight, and then turn your rug into it as you're sewing around. That was the smoothest I found, and it actually helped me pick up my pace quite a bit. So if you're curious about any of the supplies I used in my project, I'll be sure to link all of those down below. And I hope you enjoyed this quick little video. I'll see you next time.